All right, we're on.
Greetings. You're listening to Guiding Stars Evolutionary Astrology. This is your host, Kristin Fontana, and we're doing things in a new way. We've been on a Healthy Life Network for 18 or so years, and while I'm still present on that network, we're transitioning and doing podcasts, and I'm starting a wonderful new series here with my friend and colleague, Ari Moshe, discussing Chiron through the signs and houses. If you're new to this show, Guiding Stars is an interactive, soul-centered astrology talk show, and we use the symbolic language of evolutionary astrology to enlighten and empower you on this journey. So I would like to welcome Ari and just say hello again. I'm so excited to be doing this series with you. We are looking very forward to taking the topic of Chiron and going deep with it and journeying in and through the archetypes to help you understand the symbol in your birth chart. So welcome, Ari.
Thanks, Kristin. Good to be here. Good to be back with you.
It's wonderful to have you back. And we are going to be together once a month for the next year discussing Chiron, Aries through Pisces. And I know this is something, Ari, that's been percolating for you for some time. Not that we haven't discussed it in the past. We had a wonderful show that we did. Do you remember when it was?
Well, we did Neptune through the houses and Pluto through the houses. So it was a couple years, like 2012, 2013, I think.
But we did a specific Chiron show that we will have available.
Yeah, I think that was 2014.
Okay, so if you are interested in our initial show, we had a wonderful initial show. It was just really felt very organic and very felt very connected to the material with you, and so that's available too. Will be available here on the network. So I know since then, Ari, we've been talking about doing this, and it's taken some time, and sometimes it takes living life and experiencing the energies and the archetypes to really be able to want to share it with the depth that you know it deserves. Right?
Well, that's a kinder way than saying I was procrastinating for a few years. But
okay, I'm being gentle with you.
But no, it's true. It's true. And I've had a calling to teach on Chiron. In my own chart, it aspects every planet but one. It's the most aspected planet, and I've always felt very afraid to teach on Chiron, believe it or not.
How come?
Nation of procrastination and just sort of trusting the timing, as you said, that I had to live my life. The reason being, it's so intimate and real to my own life experience that I have a ninth house Chiron. So it's not about competency in teaching it as much as it is a sense of sincerity and genuineness. And that's kind of often a Chiron wound, feeling inauthentic or feeling like there's something inherently off with who we are. And so a ninth house Chiron wound is, I'm not sincere, I'm a phony, I'm lying, I'm making it up. And to commit to doing a series brings, any series really, brings up all of my teacher stuff. And anytime I teach, there's a little bit of that comes up for me. Am I being authentic? Am I being sincere? And so it's a Chiron thing that it's kind of easier to avoid it entirely, because to step into our work hurts. It brings up all of our vulnerabilities. So I've kind of just held that in my heart, knowing that the time will come. And yes, it's just my focus has been many other places and trusting the journey. So I think it's actually really interesting, the timing of it, because we're starting a Chiron series right now, and Chiron's about to enter Aries. So it's kind of this collective vibe where it's now initiating a new Chironic journey, a new healing journey, and the timing feels perfect.
It is perfect, and we are we are releasing this forecast, or not a forecast, I would say a teaching on Chiron and Aries on the day that Mars enters Aries, January 1st, 2019.
Perfect.
I mean, that feels perfect. It does. And so, as we all know, Mars and Aries are the first sign and house. The zodiac first house is an Aries house ruled by Mars. It's an initiation point, and soul on fire is what it is. And sometimes we need to walk through the fire in order to get back in touch with what created so much pain for ourselves. Or as Jeff Green used to say, you have to re-enter the fracture in order to heal it. You can't dance around it. You gotta go right into the center of it, Pluto style. And so what a wonderful time to initiate a series like this, so we can all understand our wounds more fully or wholly and allow more holiness to help us through and into and then out of that pocket that has prevented us from evolving.
Beautiful. So I'm thinking, before we jump into the first house, I want to just offer a few just thoughts about Chiron in general. As Kristin said, we have this audio that we did a few years back, 4 years back now, that we'll make available on YouTube soon. But a couple things that I've been thinking about is just the idea of what is a wound. So often with Chiron, we hear this idea that Chiron is the wounded healer. It's our sacred wound. But we don't sort of kind of think beyond that. It's like, what is an actual wound? A wound always implies that there is some moment, some experience prior to the wound that created the experience of a wound. A wound always means there is an event. It always means there is something that created the wound. And I saw on Facebook, a friend of mine, spacing on her name right now, she was asked a question and she posted this dialogue: do our wounds ever heal? And she said, yes, but they take our entire life. And I like that answer a lot. I would also say that, well, maybe the wounds don't heal, but our relationship to them heals. And what I really want to posit to sort of initiate this journey with Chiron is the reality of the wound. And with Chiron, we often feel chronically broken in some essential way. The reality of that isn't the actuality of it, isn't the actuality or the realness of a wound that then dictates our actual ineptness in something, our actual brokenness, but our relationship to it. And so yes, there's a reality that is unique to us that makes us different. We can't be like other people. There is something that sets us apart, and that is the Chiron experience. But our relationship to that is really what sort of draws a line between living as a wounded person and identifying with the wound versus being different. Maybe there being a wound, but experiencing the medicine of it. Our relationship to what hurts us the most. So let's take that as we really begin this journey through the zodiac and exemplifying how Chiron through all the houses reflects where we each have the potential to find our own medicine, to come into a greater healing and wholeness in our own selves as we are. And that as we are piece is a big part of it.
But one thing I'd like to share, you made me think of something when you were talking about the wound not going away. And it's true in that I'm thinking of Uranus and Aries currently retrograde. Uranus it's about our unresolved trauma from the past. And being in Aries, this is an Aries initiation point we're all experiencing. Uranus will be retrograde in Aries until the middle of March when it re-enters Taurus. And Uranus is about all the long-term memories that you have in your soul that are held in the cells of your being. They will never leave you. And so it's not about removing the memory. It's about changing your orientation to what happened and observing it, stepping outside of the emotion of the event and observing it like you're a witness to it, like you're watching a movie. And when we watch a movie, we can be triggered all over the place by events in the movie. We can relate to the character, but we are not that character. And so when you take a Uranian point of view with your own journey, at times it will allow you to change your perspective about what happened. And I guess another way to say it would be, what kind of wisdom or advice or counsel would you offer a best friend
Mm,
in the
mm,
same situation? You're feeling for your friend emotionally, you are taking on because of your care and concern for them, but you aren't living their reality to the degree that they are. So you can do that for yourself. It is about being your own best friend in this instance, and taking care of yourself in that way, and asking yourself, what would I offer somebody who's in my situation? And it does allow you to create a space of separation from the pain or the wound or the trauma.
mm. Beautiful. And in speaking about Uranus and shifting our relationship from story to friendly observation, friendly awareness, it makes me think, what would we do with Chiron? Right? How would we approach our feeling of brokenness with the Chiron wound? Because one of the main differences between Chiron and Uranus is Uranus corresponds to the reality as it exists prior to time and space. It's sort of the inherent individuality of the soul. And so there's an inherent detachment and an impersonalness to all experiences. Thus, we find nothing has to actually shape or inform our identity. It's not personal. So we can liberate from the past, so to speak, with Uranus. But with Chiron, there's something that hits home, and we don't liberate from that. There's something that affects a deep sense of wholeness, a deep sense of I'm okay as I am. And the intention within Chiron is not to liberate. We are not detaching. We are not separating ourselves from projection and story in the same way as with Uranus. But nor is it about getting involved in the whole psychodynamics of it either. We're not really embellishing the story either. There's something very specific that Chiron points to, and there aren't many words to describe it. And partially the awareness, the Chironic awareness in the world is sort of new. It was only, realized in the sky. I don't like using the word discovered in the 70s. And the holistic notions that come from Chiron, I feel, are really still integrating within the world.
Mm-hmm.
The quality of relationship that we find within Chiron is one of embracing what is with an openness and a spaciousness inside of ourselves. It's becoming a space to contain and hold and allow and encompass and accept exactly our condition as it is. Yes, free from story, but not free from pain. There is sort of a potential detachment in the sense that we're not embellishing it with extra thought and suffering, but there is something that stays. And that vulnerability isn't meant to go away. And I think that's the unique gift to Chiron. It says vulnerability is a part of this soul journey. Being a vulnerable being, embracing our delicateness, isn't a wound, isn't a weakness. It's not something that's wrong. And we learn with Chiron to embrace our delicate being and to move forward and to do what we're here to do. Not just one or the other, but both. You can be here and do your work, and you can be vulnerable. And that's something that's so special and unique to Chiron.
Mm-hmm.
So let's jump into the first house.
Great.
In the first house, we have the archetype of freedom, independence. There's a need within the soul with any first house activity to have the freedom that they need according to their own soul's evolutionary needs to initiate the kinds of choices that are necessary to move forward. First house requires a connection to our will so we can respond to life. No, I'm not doing this. I'm going to defend myself from this, or I'm going to defend, this thing that I care about that is important to sustain it. I'm going to say yes to this. We need to be able to say, I am moving forward in life. Thus, I'm very actively and with increasing consciousness engaging my ability to choose moment to moment. And in the first house journey, there's a randomness to it inherently because you make a choice, you're going somewhere, you don't necessarily know where that's going to lead you. but we learn, we do something, let's say we react harshly, that harsh reaction will have consequences. And we'll learn from that. That'll shape and inform further how we choose to move forward from here on out. Or if we say no to abusive behavior, that will have consequences too. Every choice that we make opens the door for the next life experience. And if we're not in touch with our ability and our power, our divine right, actually, to make choices, then there can be this profound sense of stagnation and anxiety that the soul experiences in not living their life. In the first house, it's your life, your path, you're living it. And yet one of the challenges often in the first house journey, any planet really, can be this experience of movement without perspective. Just staying in motion, but not necessarily introducing any kind of awareness. Is what I'm doing working? Is where I'm going actually getting me to where I want to go? Are these actions paving the road to what I'm really wanting to achieve and move towards in this lifetime? So we learn to become gradually more objective, more self-aware along the first house journey. When you put Chiron in the first house, we're looking at a healing journey that focuses entirely upon one's ability to consciously engage and acknowledge and accept and own their own unique life and their independence in life. Their need to make choices, to move forward, to enact a path. What often happens with anything first house, whether it's intentional or not, well, in all cases, we're a leader, even if it's just leading our own soul. When we move somewhere, we're creating a path that never existed before, each new moment. And very often in the first house journey, we might have a dharma, a purpose to be initiating a path, being a leader, walking somewhere that no one has walked before. And with Chiron in there, one of the wounds, one of the vulnerabilities can be, I don't feel strong enough, I don't feel capable enough to be strong and clear and agile to make moment-to-moment decisions, to respond to what's needed. There can be a feeling of, I am not a leader. There can also be a deep sense of, I'm afraid of being alone. I don't have the ability to navigate, and thus constantly denying oneself the true gift of their own independence and the power and the importance of them really choosing for their own life. So that's one perspective on some wounding feelings that might arise. And I want to go into sort of the source or the cause of that, because every wound has a context for it. But let me see if you want to add anything to what I've said so far.
I'm enjoying listening to your perspective on all this. Oh yeah, I mean Chiron in the first and Aries, and there can be so many wounds as a leader, perhaps, and not feeling like they did. It kind of reminds me of this wound around what a leader might experience if their responsibility was to a tribe and he or she felt like they let them down. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like falling asleep on the job, or you're in your teepee at night and normally you hear everything, any leaf that shakes, and you're out of the tent, and maybe with that natural square to Capricorn, there's this guilt that you feel and a burden of responsibility linked with this wound of not being able to be the leader that your people had needed you to be. And there's something I wanted to add here, in that a natural leader doesn't go about asking the people around them to be the leader. They just are naturally built to lead. That's what a natural leader does. People quietly follow that person not knowing why they're following them. And so there's a difference between a patriarchal leader and somebody who gets, all pumped up on all the power, needing to be at the front, at the top, in charge, and a natural leader. The natural leaders we can see in really evolved souls, like the spiritual greats of our time, a Yogananda, Jesus. These are people that naturally follow them because of what they teach and speak. It's truth. So I would say, just to add to the Aries piece, there can be the wound with Chiron in Aries, or the first house, can be feeling like you didn't do enough. Mm-hmm. And I know, with Yogananda has Chiron in the first house, it's retrograde in Virgo, right on the ascendant. I mean, of course, much of his leadership was about helping people connect with God, with the divine. And to have it in Virgo is, he's going to interface with all the people that don't feel good enough, right? Mm-hmm. Or ready. And he himself, with that Virgo Chiron, is going to feel like he wasn't good enough or didn't do enough. Even him, Yogananda himself, would be feeling that. And all of the spiritual greats of our time didn't ask to be spiritual greats, right? This is the natural leader that I'm talking about. He's got Mars and Aries in the 8th house. Look at that too.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I just wanted to add that. And thank you for bringing up that chart.
Yeah, thank you for speaking to this. So look at Chiron, Yogananda's chart. Virgo retrograde Chiron in the first house. And it's in conjunct Mars in Aries in the 8th house. Mm-hmm. So this is the soul. It's Mars and Aries in the 8th house. You have to, it's action, it's dying for your soul's purpose.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Impulse for leadership that is a directive from his soul. And that in conjunct to Chiron and Virgo, it's like, I don't know how to do this. And that actually was a permeating part of his life. There was a time in his life where he began losing devotees, and there's all this stuff and sort of, I don't remember the specifics, maybe you can fill me in, but I remember he was incredibly disheartened. And you mentioned the leadership, people naturally followed him. But then there's a sense of he's doing all this work and people weren't following. There's all these lies and scandal stuff that was made up and put out about him. Mm-hmm. And he began experiencing a lot of rejection. So he went to Mexico. He retreated for a while. And the anxiety of Chiron in the first house in Virgo, he prayed, I am yours, God. I can't do this without you. And I don't remember the exact quote, but it was something like,
yes, on the boat. It's on the boat.
Oh, but I am devoted to you. Something like that. Uh-huh. And he felt broken, but he used that. He didn't, and this is a great example because the Chiron in the first house can go into the extreme of, one, kind of hiding that brokenness and reacting with more aggression.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And that is something that has often been the source of wounding in past lives. We'll talk about that in a moment. Or they can become so identified with the brokenness that they stop being the leader that they're meant to be. Mm-hmm. And in the first house, you need to stay in motion, but the wisdom in the first house, it doesn't always mean go, do. It means, what's the next step? And sometimes with Chiron in the first house, we need to retreat from the quote unquote battlefield and go to our heart. We need to go back inside of ourselves and reassess, come back into our vulnerability, our humanity, our delicateness. Because if we're not in touch with that, then we're just making it up. We're a leader, we're acting, we're moving forward, but there's something inauthentic and forced that comes with that. And the energy of inauthenticity is something that can come with Chiron when we're not embodying our own true humanity and vulnerability. One of the things that often creates wounding, and we see this in a lot of souls from prior lifetimes with Chiron in the first house. I mean, this is like the archetype of the wounded soldier, right?
Right.
So oftentimes they're in the battlefield and they're fighting for something. Imagine first house fighting, you're adrenaline's rushing, and they may have been a leader, right? They may have been in charge of leading other troops, or given a mandate, go and do this, and they're killed in process. And the wounding here would be this total sense of, can I trust myself? Is it safe to be a leader? Is it safe to go out? And there can be this profound anxiety that's carried forward into the current life as a result. We could also have the situation of not necessarily fighting, but you're on a mission. You're going somewhere and you're attacked while doing it. Mm-hmm. And that attack can become totally debilitating to your own sense of worth and ability. And you mentioned the square to the 10th house, to Capricorn. We also had the square to Cancer, to the 4th house, which is you're separated from your roots. You're out alone. You have no security. It's like the quality of aloneness in the 1st house can be very, very traumatizing. It's like a boy separated from their family. And very, very often, 1st house dynamics do in fact correspond to souls who did something from very early in life. 1st house corresponds to early life as well as early endings. So imagine what kind of traumas can have manifested with Chiron there. So in that sense, there can be this unresolved little child dynamic, like an immaturity, not really able to follow through, not able to start something and see it through to completion, to really act upon their will and go all the way, kind of always stopping at some point, giving up, because there's something that makes it too hard for them to continue. And the medicine in those cases is, again, not just to plow through, but if it feels like I gotta stop, the opposition's too strong, I'm blocked, or I don't have the ability, I'm not strong enough, or I'm not a good leader, that right there, like that right there, that experience, that's the medicine. It's not the truth of it isn't the words, isn't the thought, it's it. Be with that. That's your work. And to continue being a leader all the while feeling what one is feeling. There's something that happens with Chiron anywhere where, in being in touch with their own vulnerability, they pave a path of healing that otherwise was not available. With Chiron in the 1st house, there is a healing path, a medicine that's being brought forth to others, to the world, to your group, to your community, whatever it might be, whatever actions, whatever path you're walking in this life. There's something that's being created, a stream for something that didn't exist, and it's medicine, and it wouldn't have been created if you weren't in touch with yourself in this intimate way.
Yeah, excellent. And one thing I think about the healing for Chiron in the 1st house or in Aries, and I'm certain that Yogananda followed this thought, was to act as if. Even when you're in that space of doubt, which is Virgo all day, all the way, Virgo, doubt, questioning yourself, I'm not up to the challenge even, right?
Mm-hmm.
And think about Virgo with all of his audience, or the part of the population he was so sensitive to, were the underdogs, essentially. But and within or the Dalits, and maybe like the Dalit population in India, and so, but I mean, obviously, any soul that wants to know God, that's who he's obviously wanting to reach. It doesn't matter if you have all the money in the world or nothing. But back to this thought of acting as if, when we put ourselves in motion, this is Virgo, right? This Taoist philosophy of the centipede, who has 500 legs and is fine as long as the centipede is just moving and putting one foot in front of the other. But as soon as it starts to stop and question or doubt what one of the legs is doing, it will become paralyzed. Yep. So it has to just put itself in motion and act as if. even like you said, even with the wound in place, you don't stop leading, right? You don't stop acting. You must continue to put yourself in motion.
Beautiful. One of the things that often comes with Chiron, and this is something I'm really appreciative of Jeff Green teaching, it's where we have often created wounds for other people.
Yes, right.
And that is oftentimes a source of permeating guilt that the soul seems to irrationally, so to speak, carry into the current life.
Mm-hmm.
And that permeating guilt then leads to a sense of, I can't really give myself this permission to be disembodied, to follow this path, to accept this work. And I just really think, though, that the Chiron in so many ways speaks about the forgiveness and the love of Creator, because there's a mandate with Chiron. There's this quality of, do your work. There's medicine for you here, and not everyone accesses it on the level of medicine, really. But there's a deeper invitation and teaching in Chiron that says the healing to how you may have hurt others in the past is not to forever remain in self-denial. It is not to forever remain in a state of abstaining from moving forward with your life. It's specifically to continue on your path, but this time to do it with your wholeness. So to actually move forward means we can't avoid our guilt, which means the guilt will have to become integrated, which means we are humbled, we heal. To not move forward means we stay in guilt. We stay a life of avoiding feeling what we are afraid of feeling. And so we don't really heal. And thus we also don't cultivate the humility and the self-awareness that really will help us understand what we did wrong in the past and how we can do things differently. We can only really heal actions that we've done out of integrity that have hurt others when we act again, but with a new consciousness. Mm-hmm. And so it's a full circle. It's completely holistic. We act, and the very act of moving forward might bring up a permeating guilt and undeserving or not okay. And so Chiron in the first house, this can be, I have killed others, I have hurt others, I was reckless and aggressive and violent. All kinds of ways in which we can find a soul creating woundings for other people by way of being out of balance with that masculine energy, that yang impulse. And there's so much of that in the world, of course. Let's change the screens here back to there you go. Let's see here, how do I do this? Design, transitions, animation, slideshow. Okay, from the beginning. There we go. Just this nice picture of that you offered as a woman walking into the fire.
I still see the chart, Ari.
Oh, you see the chart? I know what's happening. Let's try it this way. Boom. Wait, that's not it. All right, well, you're still here, right?
Yeah, I'm still here.
That's the important part.
We'll find the image.
Find the
there
image.
She is.
There she is. You see her right now? Okay. It's not there anymore. There it is.
There
Okay.
she is.
To have this sense of, well, I forgot where I was going with that, but I'm just gonna start. We have this image of a woman walking into the fire, and that's such a beautiful, this sort of descriptive quality of what Chiron in the first house can feel like. Mm-hmm. You have to act. You have to move forward.
Right.
And that can feel like you're ripping your heart out. There can be all kinds of internal psychological resistance that keeps you from really wanting to do that. And if a soul's carrying guilt because of ways they've acted, ways they've hurt or wounded others in the past, oftentimes Chiron will then bring us into situations where, and this is also something Jeff Green taught, we're going to often do things, and this is not just if you've created wounding in the past, we're often going to do things that are beyond our scope of ability to actually do.
Mm-hmm.
And this can happen in two ways. It can happen in a way of we're getting beyond ourselves, and we're almost like martyring ourselves for a greater cause. Oftentimes that's rooted in a deep sense of guilt. Like, I need to do something to help. But maybe we're not actually capable of biting off and chewing all that we've bitten off. And so we end up hurting ourselves in some way, and in a way further wounding ourselves by way of moving forward with it. And that's one example, but there's another example where it's actually totally aligned, where yes, you're going to move forward and it's going to hurt you and you're going to be destroyed in the process, and that's okay. And to really have the distinction between the two. Like, one is more of an unconscious, unhelpful masochism.
Right.
One, and the latter is more of almost like a spiritual sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very big part of the Chiron. And, Rose Marcus has talked about Chiron as initiation. I really resonate with that terminology. It's absolutely initiatory. We're initiated into a completely new dimension of being here as a soul in this human experience with Chiron. And to walk our path, be in touch with all that is happening here on the inside. We will be ripped apart. It will destroy us completely. Not a Pluto destruction, right? It's a completely different kind of destruction. It'll rip our hearts out. It'll bring us to such a delicate, vulnerable place. And that's what's left, right? What's left after that? And so we're no longer hiding from our guilt, our fear, our feeling of brokenness, our resistance. No longer is that an issue. We've embraced it, and there's so much medicine in that place.
You know what I think about too with the fire in the Aries first house, in terms of how to help the process of, how do you heal this piece, and to remember that fire is the greatest purifier. And even Yogananda taught the Agni, I think it was Yogananda. I know Jeffrey taught it this in the school back in the day. The Agni ritual is essentially when you hold a fire in your third eye, and anything that you want to purify from your past, your attachment to it, your connection to it, the negativity it may hold on you, the negative thoughts, say in this case with the Virgo energy, we could find that with the Aries. Anything in your psyche, your soul, your brain, your mind, you just throw into that fire in your third eye. It's like a meditation. And that fire does symbolize a purification of the past. It's not removing the past, it's just purifying all the thoughts connected to the past. They're not allowing you to grow or to move forward at all. That are keeping you stuck. And with Chiron, it's very much, to me, it reminds me of like a skip step signature, in a way that you cannot embrace the North Node fully until you resolve the skip step. The same is true for Chiron. You cannot evolve in this lifetime unless you get to the root of the why. That what is that wound about, and how can I heal it, or how can I work with it? How can I be with it? How can I accept it? And how can I ultimately understand it? So
beautiful.
Yeah.
There are many examples of souls, and we'll look at one in a moment, because we often just get, in the culture, we get so caught up in Chiron as a wounded healer, but there's so many dimensions to it that we often miss out. There are many examples where Chiron manifests as like a chronic state of being wounded, creating wounds, being wounded, creating wounds. And it's more common than not, actually, to actually access the medicine level of Chiron is a journey that not everyone in the current life may get to, or it can be understood at certain levels. But it's so common within the Chiron journey to be, especially if you put it in the first house, to be in a reactive, wounded state. It's like a reactive little child. Being wounded, acting out, wounding others, being wounded, acting out, wounding others. So let's look at a really potent example of this. Let's see. Can you see the chart that I'm posting right now?
I'm still seeing the girl with the fire.
Oh yeah? Okay, let's try this again. Okay, now.
Oh, wow.
Israeli Declaration of Independence. Fascinating dynamic. So just look right there in the first house. Chiron and Scorpio retrograde on the south node. Squaring and ruled by Pluto, which is conjunct Saturn in Leo in the 10th house. When the Israeli state was founded in 1948, it was during the meeting of actually founding the state that they were being attacked by the neighboring Arab nations. So first house, initiating new journey, right? Ruled by Pluto in the 10th house, country, nation, state.
Yeah.
This journey was being initiated during a process of violence.
Mm.
And this is a great example where there's been this cycle of being wounded, creating wounding, being wounded, creating wounding. 10th house corresponds to, of course, boundaries, borders, nations, also just land allotments, right? Where does this nation begin? Where does this nation end? And Chiron, first house, Scorpio is the energy of war. Both can be together as protecting land or invading land, either, right? And that's been an ongoing struggle for Israel, where they both experience the land that they made to a state as being attacked, but then they've also invaded land that belonged to other people. And they came into a situation where a lot was taken from people, from Arab people that were living on that land that was then called Palestine, and taking that land, defining Leo in the 10th house, their own sovereign nation, the importance of their nation, and creating a lot of hurt and wounding in the process. And all these things were going on well before the state was created as well. It's a much longer story that goes back a very long time, and it's a very fascinating thing to learn about. But just to understand the dynamic of Chiron with wounding, there's been, and this continues until today, where the Israeli government uses excessive violence against the Arab people living in the territories of Gaza and in the West Bank to control and keep safety in their nation. Like, there's an underlying fear and a trauma actually amongst many Israelis of their own safety being threatened, and a very reasonable fear because there's been so much violence and terrorism in their state that you can be on a bus and things could happen.
Yeah.
So the trauma of violence, and of course the state of Israel is founded after a whole nation, not just the Holocaust, not just the Second World War, but even before then, people began moving to that land because of all the pogroms and the persecution of the Jewish people. So it's an example of this chironic cycle playing out. I would offer that there is a potential, meaning on a purely archetypal level, to look at this chart and see where's the potential medicine here. What might it look like as a nation? And I acknowledge this is coming from my own subjective. You don't look at a chart without subjective perspective. You never,
Exactly.
you're always assessing your own assessment of the soul of the nation, of whoever you're looking at. So this is mine, obviously. But to me, there would be a potential for healing in moving beyond the reactivity and I gotta protect. Reactive, I gotta protect. Reactive, and I gotta protect. That's very short-sighted, and it's just, first house, Leo, looking at my own immediate world, my own needs like a child, afraid of itself, and I need to be stronger and bigger and more powerful to make sure I'm not vulnerable. That doesn't get anywhere. More violence, more aggression does not protect you from violence and aggression. There would be a homeopathic medicine in actually embracing the deep, deep wound carried in the state of Israel. A deep wound of feeling vulnerable, of feeling attacked, of feeling not safe. There's something to explore in that itself. And I'm seeing this happening specifically amongst more people, the younger generation. So many what we call refusenikim, people that refuse to go to the army, or people that left because there's so much trauma in the state. But there's a lot of peace organizations and people in the land that are doing work with Palestinians and Israelis to bridge peace, to come to a place of we're both hurting. We are both hurting, and I'm so sorry for what I've done. And this is what it's been like for me. Places for reconciliation. So being a warrior of peace, Chiron in the first house, being a warrior of healing. And not just healing, healing 10th house, Pluto ruling all of that, right? Healing and healing lands, healing peoples.
Hey, Ari, I was just noticing too, you're talking, of course, Neptune's in Libra. It's retrograde in the 12th house.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Trining Mercury and Gemini in the 8th. That's like both sides, right? Seeing both sides, both points of view. And as you're talking, I mean, all these symbols in this chart, they're just everywhere. Even Venus, which rules that Neptune in Libra in the 12th, is trining that Scorpio ascendant. Venus rules the North Node as well. I mean, there's a lot of potential for movement here.
Indeed. Indeed.
Everything has a limit.
Everything
right?
is, yeah. Everything has a limit, and sometimes that limit takes a few thousand years. Some souls will repeat the same dynamics in just different bodies. And it's fascinating to start looking into that. But yes, nothing lasts forever.
Well, part of any soul's ability or capacity to make a new choice in the face of old dynamics, because the groove can be so deep, and everybody makes choices as a result of their own security system. What feels familiar or secure doesn't mean it's good for you, right? To go to battle doesn't mean it's a good for you kind of thing. But we do that. We lean on what feels familiar and secure. But to make new choices in the face of old dynamics, typically it can only occur when somebody is conscious enough or aware of what continues to repeat, which is what this whole series is about for people, Aries, first house today, but the whole series that we are moving through, Aries through Pisces, is so people can get to know that energy in their own chart and catch it as it occurs, right? Catch it ahead of time.
Let's look at one more chart, and maybe I'll let you speak to this one. This is Barack Obama.
Oh, the first time talk about a natural leader.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about the first time I really have been sitting with his chart, looking at Chiron in particular, but you know, he is a peaceful warrior, isn't he? Chiron and Pisces retrograde in the first. And it is retrograde. We talk about the fact that he was Abraham Lincoln in a past life. He definitely has come back to, picked up where he left off. We talk about that on the board a bit. It's been said that this is who he was, and there was a lot of serendipities and no coincidences. There's no coincidence, I should say. It's some of the things that have occurred that links him to that past. So there is some healing that needs to happen here. And of course, with Pluto opposing his Chiron, 7th house Pluto in Virgo opposing Chiron, he's definitely been part of an underdog population, right? His focus was all about the people, those that can't help themselves, who have less, to try and make things more fair and balanced. And of course, there's been plenty of projections, people not seeing him clearly, and even with the square to his moon in Gemini in the 4th, suggesting that he wasn't born in America, the whole family of origin thing, the wounds around that. And so he is very much a natural leader. And although he may have wanted to lead. I think it was really more like feeling called to lead,
Yes.
because he was just tired of, everything feeling so broken, and that all the little guys or the underdogs were not being cared for. That motivated him to lead. He didn't feel some ego attachment to being a leader. He has Mars and Virgo, as well in the 8th, trining Saturn and Capricorn. So, yeah, so that's a beautiful example.
And I'll just speak to this, that it's Pisces, and that Pisces is also ruled by Neptune, trines Neptune in the 9th house in Scorpio. So there's a lot of, I'm being called from a deep spiritual place inside of me.
Definitely.
It's a personal truth that impels him, that is coming not from his own ego, not from his own mind. And to have moved forward, and what I want to kind of flesh out is just sort of the vulnerability of his path. It's moving forward, following a deeper spiritual impulse that's rooted in the principles of unity and inclusion, and having the road ahead of him being seemingly insurmountable. So many, first house, I'm trying to move forward. I got, the unknown forces on my side, and there are all these obstacles, so much violence and opposition. And this chart definitely speaks in past lifetimes, early endings, a lot of violence, a lot of trauma, a lot of rejection dynamics around exclusion, alienation being projected upon that Uranus in the South Node, in the first house with Uranus in the 7th. It's all this trauma stuff. But to be moving forward and have faith. So Chiron in the first house in Pisces can be a wounding in feeling connected enough to a higher source to fuel his movement.
Definitely.
So, and being quiet about it. I personally believe that one of his masterful qualities, I don't feel he was perfect. I don't always agree with a lot of things that he did, but I recognize he brought a lot of healing and introduced so much healing into this country, and brought a very beautiful consciousness that I feel is higher than anyone that I've seen in my lifetime in that role.
Absolutely. I mean, look at
And
the grand trine between Neptune, Venus, and Chiron, all in water signs.
yeah, totally. And I believe that he was consciously hiding, secretive, quiet about his connection to spirit,
Totally. I
so that
agree.
he can do what he needed to do. But that Pisces Neptune, for a soul that would be in the beginning of the spiritual stages of evolution, is definitely a soul that had to keep deep inside a sense of, I have faith, but this is asking me to move forward, even though this is really hard. I have to constantly be rooted in the unseen and trust in the journey. First house, I don't know where it's going, but I'm going to keep on going.
The unknown is the big, great, wide open, so clear in this chart. One thing I wanted to mention, I agree with you. I do feel he's a first stage spiritual. And you think, how is that possible to have a president of the United States? But he did have to keep quiet about, I feel like, where he is evolutionarily speaking, because the country never would have embraced somebody outwardly that evolved if their main focus was on spiritual pursuits, right? He's got to deal with the mainstream population, 75% are consensus. They're going to maybe a dogmatic, formal kind of church. So he has to be able to speak to the masses. I'm just like you. I'm just like everyone. But
Hello?
hi,
You there?
I'm here.
Okay, good. I missed the last, something skipped.
Okay, I just was saying that uh, I do feel he too had to keep quiet with the degree or the stage of evolution because of his need to reach the masses and be like one of them,
Yes.
given that 75% of our population is in the consensus state. And it was hard enough to be a black man running for president. So it was to give the appearance that he's just like the masses, but inwardly he is very much more, he was absolutely, I agree, is more evolved, first stage spiritual.
Great. All right. Well, I believe you had to go at 1 o'clock. So how are we doing with time?
It's 1 o'clock.
Yep.
Right on the money. I know we could talk for hours. I mean,
We could.
this is
I
just,
heard that there are a few more people with Chiron in the first house to talk about too.
oh yeah, there's always more to talk about. But it's going to be a wonderful journey. I feel so inspired already just having this time with you, Ari, this hour, and it just opens everything up in the chart. It creates this emotional connection of energy to a chart when you go directly into the wound for somebody, the wound.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we need to do with clients. That's what we need to do with ourselves. We need to stay inside the feeling of something, the emotion of it, good, bad, or indifferent. And that's how we grow. That's how we evolve. And that's how we understand the past, what we need to do now, and what we need to do moving forward.
Beautiful. Yeah. And I often say that when I bring up Chiron to a client, almost always there are tears.
No,
For
definitely.
years I've been observing that.
Absolutely. Oh, you just touched that tender spot in the chart, and everything softens, and yeah, the tears fall. I think of my own natal Chiron placement, and I could feel it as soon as you said it, just saying the words.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very intimate and personal symbol for us all. So I am so looking forward to the next time we connect, Ari. We're going to look at Chiron and Taurus, or Chiron in the second house. And as you all know now, we look at the whole chart. We weave it in to the symbols, to the Pluto paradigm. We look at the nodes. We consider the stage of evolution for anybody we're sitting with, or anybody we are looking into. So keep all of that in mind in your studies.
And I also want those, so for those who aren't actually familiar with the evolutionary astrology paradigm, we may be mentioning concepts here and there. Not many, but some that may not be familiar. So please be invited to check out schoolofevolutionaryastrology.com. There's a message board there and just lots of learning material. And my website also has several learning resources, and there's audio teachings that me and Kristin did some years back on Neptune and Pluto through the houses. So my website is arimoshe.com.
Awesome. Excellent. I'm so excited to work with you again, Ari, and we will be back in a month.
Yay. All right.
Until
Bye.
next time, namaste.